lonely, and you just want your husband or your wife back with you. The responsibilities of the house fall on you, and sometimes that can be a heavy burden, especially if you're working outside the home, and then coming home and dealing with that. So Brian, how did you feel knowing that your wife is bearing the weight of this? I know you appreciated it. How did you come back to the synergy of everything that's going on, and not just throw yourself totally in? Or did you just throw yourself totally in and said, I'm back, I'm Superman, I'm here?
That was basically, that's what happened. Because like I was saying, for me, the world was turned off. There was a steel tube with a bunch of guys in it, and we were somewhere in the world.
Hey, hang on a second. You said that a couple of times, how you turn it off. It's clearly, or surely, for a lot of people, it's not that easy.
Right.
So when you say turn it off, what does that mean, and how do you get there?
So for me, because I knew that there was this task that had to be done. So emotionally, if I were to try to stay attached, it's probably not the right way of saying it, but it's the best way. If I tried to stay attached to the fact that I wasn't going to see her for X number of months, whatever it was, I couldn't focus on my task. So doing what we do, as you know, is very dangerous. And not that we're going to sink and not come back up. Your last surface is always your best thing. So I knew emotionally that I had to sort of segregate that part of my mind and not think about her. Because nothing I could do, no matter what it was, would help her. In the physical, I should say.
Right.
Obviously, I could pray for her and hope that she's covered and taken care of. But from the physical side, I could have been thousands of miles away, and at best, I'm a week away from getting back to home if there's an emergency. But in reality, knowing as soon as that hatch gets shut, I'm not getting off this thing unless something really bad goes sideways. So there was just a means by which you stopped focusing on the things you couldn't repair or affect, and you focused on the things that you could. And just each day, get to the next day, get to the next day. So I guess that's the best way I can describe about turning it off.
I'd say, because when he said it, he goes, it's like, okay, I have lost this. I don't get to see my husband now. I don't get to see him. It's okay. Well, I will get to see him though on the summer, we didn't always know, in a few months, he will be coming back, and you focused on the positive aspect of that. And instead of focusing on, oh, I've now just left, or he's just left me behind. So it is that mindset of that emotional side of where are you putting your focus on the negative or on the positive.
So how did you prepare knowing you were going to deploy for her? Was there any kind of preparation? Okay, I'm going to be gone in a week or a month. Let me do these things so they're not weighing on her. How did you prepare to leave?
So I knew when I was leaving, but I really couldn't tell her until like a few days beforehand. So I would try to make sure that things in the car were taken care of. If the house needed repairs, try to do the little things that she needed me to do, but didn't know she needed me to do them. So I'd always try to work ahead as best as I could. There's no way I'm going to know everything, but the things that, like we used to have an oil-fired burner that would keep the house warm. So if I was deploying for the winter, I would go and clean it out. So that way she wouldn't have to call a repair service to come and take care of it. Little things like that, I would try to plan as much ahead as I could. But sometimes they would say, okay, hey, we got to go. We're leaving in 2 days. Get your affairs together and go.
Wow.
That was rare, but it would happen at times. They'd be like, well, we got to go. And, so sometimes it was short notice. Most time we knew about when it was time to go. But for the most part, it was planning involved so I could help her out some.
Gotcha. Were there any ever major events that you had planned, vacations, trips, and then all of a sudden you find out a couple of days, okay, I'm not going to be able to make this trip?
Yeah.
Laughing.
Well, because
there's a story behind it.
Yeah, there is. So our youngest had been born, and he had a hip click, sort of what she had. So he was scheduled for a ultrasound. So I requested time off to take him to the ultrasound, and it was disapproved all the way up to my CO. So as soon as the CO got it, he approved it. Well, that makes everyone else in your chain mad at you, even though you're not the one that had the CO approve it, he's the one that approved it. But either way, you now have bad blood with your chain of command all the way up. So they left me behind on this run, and then they called on me and they're like, hey, you're going down to Georgia, you're taking some guys down and you're bringing some guys back. So just bring a couple days worth of clothes. Got it. So I show up in Georgia and they're like, no, 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 you're going with us. You're deploying. And I don't have my uniforms because I was told not to bring uniforms. I don't have any of my ditty bag. So I have no shave gear, no all the things that you need when you're underway. I've got none of the underway clothes. I don't have my sneakers. So I have nothing with me. And literally I call her and say, I'm not coming back. I don't know when I'm going to be back. I'll see you eventually. And that was the end of that. It was so, I don't know what happened on her side, but it was like there was there was no choice on my side. It wasn't like, no, I got to go back. I have a wife waiting for me. So it was like, nope, I got a job to do. I'm going to stay right here.
Yeah, it's a what? You're telling me what? No, 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 that's not the way. And you know, in the military, you don't have an option.
Yeah.
It just is. So then I kind of go, okay, you get mad, you get angry, not necessarily at him, partially. If I go honestly, partially, and then you know, it's just the situation. And you put those emotions, like you said, you have your emotions, but you have to put them in check. And as you had said earlier, is you don't react on your emotions. You have the emotions and you go, okay, take a moment to breathe.
Yeah.
And pray. And then again, call up my friends and say, that really good, because I did have that one, it was the husband and wife. It's like, I'm like, I need, what do I do now? And they're like, all right, we're just going to get through this. And, you know, you kind of switch. It is that switch of like, okay, and it is still the fact of, all right, I will get through this.
Yeah.
You know, and
those moments are so important to recognize where you are, validate it, because I think that's where emotional affairs begin. Because the person's not there, you're mad at the situation, you either have a close friend or somebody that is there all the time. And then before you know it, whether it's a coworker you're working with, somebody, all of a sudden now you begin to get connected to that other person without realizing you're getting connected to that other person. So, you know, the opportunities we've had to really minister to those who've had affairs, they said, well, it just happened. I'm like, no, it didn't just happen. That's a deception. It doesn't it begins with the emotional idea of there's no boundaries. And so in emotional intelligence, you know there's boundaries that we've set and they're clear. And you have to set those boundaries early. As I was saying with responders, there's so much practice that goes into how to respond that when the incident happens, it's not trying to figure out how to handle it. It's now you do what you've been trained to do. And I think, you know, those are jobs, but these are our lives. And we never take the opportunity and the time to learn how to respond. What do I do if? And to have those candid and honest and transparent conversations with our spouse about where we are. Now, it's hard when he's gone, of course. So it's so important to have, you know, that trusted friend that you know will hear you out, but direct you to do the right thing.
right.
It's important for you. I want to emphasize what my wife just said regarding the boundary component. Because it would be easy for you to develop relationships, not that it's your intent to be unfaithful to your husband, but it's easy for you to have needs. It's easy for somebody to come alongside and be there in that husband role, helping you and doing those things for you. And you really have to be careful of that. At the same time, for those of us who are first responders, it's important for us to maintain those parameters or borders that don't allow for someone other than our spouse to come into our lives and take on a role that would meet our needs, not just physically, but emotionally, and then, you know, just somebody I can talk to, somebody I can be honest with, somebody I can be transparent with. All those things are intended for your spouse. And sometimes when we let people in there, then that's when you get the answer, will it just happen? And that's where you have to be careful. So one of the things that that I've learned over the years is that I don't I don't have female friends that are not my wife's friends. I don't have people in my life who they're just over here and my wife doesn't know their name, doesn't know who they are, doesn't know how I'm related to them and that kind of thing. And that doesn't mean that that's a catch-all, meaning somebody who is close to both of us, if I'm not careful, something still could happen. I'm just simply saying that as a matter of practice and a matter of lifestyle, these are some of the things that you can layer into your relationship. Like Maureen, you wouldn't have male friends that aren't friends of Brian's, and my wife doesn't have male friends that aren't friends of mine, or at least people that I don't, that I don't know anything about. You know what I mean? So when those things, when you find yourself as part of your duty in a situation with a member of the opposite sex, like when you were on the ship, were there any females on the ship?
No. Well,
all guys?
It was all guys. This is before they allowed females on submarines.
Ah.
And they still don't actually allow them on fast boats. They only are on what they call boomers, which are a little bit bigger than what I was on. But yeah, so it was just all guys where I was. We'd get females from what they call the tender, but they would only come on for half a day and do a job and leave. So they were just there to, it's not like there was a relationship developed with them. They were there, fix an item, and then they were gone.
Yeah. But even with that, there was at least at some point a male-female interaction.
Yeah.
Whether that's on ship, whether that's in port, whether that's at a military event. So we're not just talking about sailors, we're talking about soldiers, airmen, Marines. Anybody who's in those circles, certainly they come alongside someone of the opposite sex. And so what we want to exhort you to do is to just take that necessary step to guard the sanctity and the covenant of your marriage, so that you don't make a mistake. Or get yourself in a situation that becomes compromising. Because as we know, it's important for us to avoid those things that even appear evil.
That's right.
So even if you're not doing anything wrong, it's important for you to set the right example for the people who are watching.
Absolutely. And that's key, because it's a slow drift, as we know. The enemy doesn't play fair. And so it's those small things that happen over time, and you start getting relational with people, and you're letting them in on how you're feeling and what's going on. So they have a relational equity with you now. And it's so important, I think, like you said, to draw those healthy boundaries early, so that it's going to be very hard to fall off the cliff when the boundary's way far from the cliff. And I think for us, a lot of the people we used to work with, because you're working on these high, intense cases and things, you get connected already, because I don't have that relational part with him, because I'm not working the case and I'm not doing this. And then when he comes home, sometimes it's overwhelming for him to even begin to explain to me about the case, So it's that moment where there's going to be connections at work, but you have to make sure that those connections, there's a boundary, so that you do stay emotionally healthy. And you find yourself sometimes either thinking about that person, you're working with that person all the time. Females I've had to counsel, because we like affirmation. And when there's somebody affirming you all the time, your hair is beautiful, your dress is beautiful, everything's beautiful, and then you go home and your spouse barely, sees you, or they do, but they just don't articulate it. So then all of a sudden you start thinking these things without really stopping your mind from going there. And I think that's how people get caught up in emotional places where now it's not healthy. And then before you know it, you're seeking that person out, and you're trying to find out where they are at work, and it's not so much the person but what they're supplying to you. And so I think with the military, I knew a person actually he deployed in Afghanistan, and his spouse had his wife had an affair while he was gone, but he found out in Afghanistan. So he can't even get back to deal with it. He has to try to stay focused on what he's doing. Meantime, his family is blowing up here in the States. And so that pressure and that tension and the stress of that emotionally can really weigh on you. So did you have anybody when you were working with them that you had the opportunity to help in those areas of emotional intelligence?
There was a few times. I think of one person in particular. We come back from a run, and we finished up our job and went home for the day, and he had walked in on his wife with somebody else. So on the boat, it happened probably more regularly than we would care to talk about, but it happens quite a bit. So there was just, didn't really get a chance to help anybody, because usually when that happens, the person just wants to be left alone.
Yeah.
They just are, all of a sudden they want to close all their doors, they don't want to talk to anybody. Guys that were closer to him, he could sort of lean on a little bit. I knew him, he was a friend, but he was in a different department, so I wasn't really able to speak to him directly.
Right.
But from all the guys that I know that went through it on the boat side, you could tell that they just, the pain was so incredible they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Now, I say all that to say this: in the military, we're trained to find weakness. It's just what we do. So as soon as we know that about a person, we're immediately needling him about it, as cruel or not cruel as that may be, which is, we're instantly on top of it, because that's what we do. Even on a submarine service where I'm not facing the enemy in person, my job is to pull on as much pain from that person as I possibly can. As I know it sounds really bad, but it's just one of those things that naturally occurred. And so for the person you're talking about in Afghanistan, I'm sure once the guys found out about it, they were just needling him day in and day out about it. That's just how we were.
The culture.
Yeah. So on the sub, you really had to show your hardest side at all times. Any chance or even moment of someone getting into your soft underside, you were done. So even if you was your soft underside, you had to almost shut it down and say, whatever, guys, start joking with them about the incident.
Gotcha.
I know friends of ours, he was dating a girl, and they were on what's called a med run. This is before I met him, and she broke up with him while he was on this 6-month med run. Just sent him a text, or the radiogram is what we called him. Sent him a radio message, we're done, have a nice day, and that was it. That was the end of the message. And so the guys on the boat knew about it, and he was distraught, and they just went after him, and he just eventually just developed a thick skin and was just started joking into it as well. So that's just, I don't know, it sounds bad, and it really isn't great.
The joking is likely to mask a lot of pain.
It was,
a lot
absolutely.
of people who joke about those things really don't want to, like you said, they don't want to disclose that little chink in their armor, because they recognize that will be clearly used against them.
Yeah.
So what do we say to those military families that are watching and they're going through pain? You mentioned that they kind of they don't want to talk about it, or they shut people out.
Right.
That can't be good.
Right.
Any recommendations in the last few minutes that we have regarding how they can find peace in real difficult situations?
So for me, it's sort of what we do now. Even we have accountability folks. So the guys I would do Bible study with, or the guys that we would have service with, these were the guys that I was accountable to. So if something were to happen between her and I, these are guys I could go back to. I mean, we're all in our 20s, so it's not like we have this lifelong experience of how to handle marriage. The one thing I think that helped our marriage out was we made a commitment to one another that no matter what happened, that we would stay with one another.
That's great.
And that was from day one. So it didn't matter if I did 20 in or if I just went in and got out. Our decision to stay together was no matter what happens, we're going to work through it. And that's helped us out through the years. My recommendation to anyone that's going through something like that is, as much as it hurts, open up to somebody, because that pain is going to come back and create a lot of issues. There's a lot of guys I know that got out because of that. They were discharged on a medical discharge because of those. They couldn't handle the issues at home, so they were medically discharged for that. But yeah, for me, like I said, I found guys I could talk to.
Good. And
just really lay it out. Hey guys, what's your recommendations? You know.
So that's really good.
Well, one of the things that we say is that your response is your responsibility. So regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the pain that you feel, the circumstances, whether it's your fault or not, you do have control over how you respond to it.
Yeah.
So I don't want those going through difficulty in our military services to think that suicide, injuring yourself, injuring someone else is the answer.
Or addictions.
Or addictions to dealing with the pain that you're encountering. So please reach out. If that's you, reach out, get
Please.
someone to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do pray for you because there is help. And as we want to recap, it's about community, it's about staying connected, and it's about reaching out and getting the help you need. And there is help. God is always there. Pray. Find a local church that believes well. And join them, get into community. We're just so grateful that you joined us. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
So enjoyed having you here. And we want to thank you for joining us on Marriage Behind the Shield. If you'd like to learn more about Shield Ministries, please visit our website at shieldministriesinternational.org. Remember, we are called to serve and protect, and that should always be first at home.
Thank you guys for being here. Well done.
Done.
Very, very nice.
Oh, not so bad, baby.
You want to come back?